Time for our next upgrade on our Duplicator i3 clone, which is a clone of a clone. So today we're going to be installing the Flexion Extruder, hot block, hot end. It's basically an entire replacement kit for pretty much everything except for the stepper motor itself. So this should be a fun one. Let's go ahead and get started. First thing I'm going to do is the traditional removing of the fan. So like we always do, we're going to go ahead and brace this against the side, and we're going to remove the fan. That comes right out. We set this down. I like to try to keep everything together there in one bundle. And then now that we've got that out, I'm going to go ahead and carefully press down on my lever and kind of lift this off the existing filament there. Now that's out. Now we're going to go ahead and disconnect the motor. And there, we've got it out. Next thing we need to do is remove the filament from the actual extruder here, so we can get the rest of that out. So I'm going to go ahead and preheat or heat the extruder. Go to 220. It'll just make it real easy to push through. And the idea here is that I want to make sure that when I take this thing apart, it's nice and clean. I might resell the Micro Swiss all metal hot end and block here. So perfectly good stuff, nothing wrong with it. Just needed something that was going to be able to handle the filament path a little better. You can see the aluminum end on here. It's great. I'm going to miss this one. It's only lasted a couple of weeks for me. Did some really good prints on it. And then I had made an attempt to print a block and kind of install a PTFE tube in here to guide the filament. But honestly, you know, before I got too far into it, I saw some of the other posts on the forum, and then I saw this, and it took me all of about, maybe 10 days of lusting after that before I finally clicked the order to pick that one up. So it's pretty cool stuff. I love the way it looks. I love the concept behind it. I love the fact that it's developed by the guys who did Ninja Flex. So, you know, who better to create something that's going to handle TPU well. And then just across the board, most of my extrusion issues have been due to a lot of filament getting ground up and stuck inside of the filament pathway. So being able to hopefully eliminate that by having a little, cleaner pathway and a brush that goes along that pathway will make my prints more successful. So we'll start with a manual push here. We got that on. We'll go to the smallest key. I want to say the smallest key is 1.75 millimeters. It lines up with the filament quite nicely. Alright, feels like we're bottomed out pretty well there. I'm just going to give that a second, pull it back just a little bit. Yeah, still have a little bit more to go, it looks like. Oh, it's starting to get hot. Yeah, I have a funny feeling I'm going to be cleaning this thing out, because this is getting impossible to... Oh, no, there we go, we got more. I'm doing a pumping action here. Come up a little bit, come back out a little bit. There we go, we got it loosened up. Yep, looks like we're pretty well cleaned out there. So I'll shut off the printer. Right, we got that all shut down. And I'm going to give that a few minutes to cool off. Meanwhile, we're going to go ahead and take apart the actual extruder pathway itself. Let's get a good look at it here. There we go. And we first find that you have a good squeeze here. Then you start unscrewing the screw that goes into the lever itself. And you want to sort of have pressure across the whole thing, so you're taking as much of that tension off the screw as possible. I have no interest in damaging this screw, crushing the threads, and I also don't want it to come flying off at me when I get to the point where I release the tension. There it goes, from the rest of the block. So that one's out. These little ball hex heads hold very, very well. And now let's go ahead and do the other side. There we go. We're going to go ahead and remove the gear, or yeah, the feeder gear here. So I'll go ahead and get this around here. And I found that this one takes just a little bit different size of a hex key. I don't know if maybe I've just torqued the head off my other one, but another set hex key seems to work better for this particular grub screw. So we'll take that one off. We've got the stepper motor all cleared off, and we're ready to go ahead and start installing the Flexion Extruder. And so the first step is we're going to go ahead and take this out of the box, and I'm going to leave the gear here for now, the actual extrusion gear, and we're going to start by mounting the brace, or the pulley gear, and sort of the main body of this. And this is what actually tilts back and forth to create tension against your filament. And so we get that on there nice and tight, and it's got some nice swivel to it. Second step, we're going to go ahead and we're going to install the setting gear, or the setting wheel. And what this does is it has different distances from the body of this wheel. We can kind of see it better from here. Each different side has a different amount of, or I guess a different distance. So you can see there's numbers here, and 1 is going to be the largest sort of gap in this space between the gear and the pulley. 2 is going to be a little bit smaller, 3 a little smaller, and 4 the smallest. So you can see it's sort of a flat surface that this grub screw sits against. So we got that in place, nice and tight. And then when you've got everything in place, once you've switched your filament size, you go ahead and tighten down the grub screw, and that'll press right against the wheel here, or right against the edge of this. And you can adjust that even more by using the grub screw. So So that sort of gives you that setting. We're going to loosen it all the way up right now so that we can install the actual feeder gear. Now we're going to go ahead and install the extruder gear here. And you can see this is a really nicely machined piece. You've got this beautiful 1.7 mil sort of area in here. See if I can get a focus on that. See if I take something interesting out of the background here, if it'll try. It's not great, but it's okay. You've got 2 grub screws, you know, sort of at a 90-degree angle to hold it really well onto the extruder itself. And they're nice and sharp in there. It's a clean pathway. You can see it's really well machined. So this is going to be a great piece. So let's go ahead and slide it on. And go ahead and pick one of those grub screws. They've got some Loctite on them. And I'm going to give it just a little twist in here until I can see the head poking through just a little bit. And that'll sort of act as my guide. See if one of them has more play than the other. Not really. Good, there we go. And then I'm going to work sort of down to the right of the motor here. That way I can get to the screw to tighten it this direction. Otherwise you're pretty well blocked on access to this. I might have driven that a little bit too far. Yep, I did. I'll back this one out too. Here we go. Sort of support the brush while we're at that. You want that to touch because this extruder gear actually drives the cleaning brush. So then we're going to tighten it down, but just enough so that it won't, so that the motor will turn or the shaft will turn, but that you've still got some up and down flexibility. Actually, I'm going to loosen it all the way up here because I want the filament to line up. Now it's already moving nicely. I must have some grab there. I want the filament to line up once we get it in place. We need to align our filament pathway is the next step in here, and I'll show you a couple of things not to do. One of the videos recommends using a crescent wrench to sort of drive the motor to help push the filament through. That's fine. That's a good approach. What you want to make sure is not happening when you're using a crescent wrench or something with enough torque to do damage is that you're in a situation, I think I had the right one the first time, where your grub screw is hanging out of the housing. So in that case, if you've got the grub screw hanging out and you twist this, you're going to actually hit the body of the, whatever you would call this, the actual, the guider or the pulley holder. And if you, and this one's okay, so this one's not the flat one. Basically this one just moved with the body of the, or moved with the shaft, or the shaft moved independent of it, so it wasn't any big deal. So we'll get that back down to a point where it's holding on, and I'll show you where the bad one is here. So this one, if you have this one out and you don't notice it, and now it will actually hit this frame here and will keep going. If you tilt it the other direction, you're not seeing it, kind of tucked back in there. You get your filament in here to align it, and I'll show you how to align the filament in just a second. And then you grab and rotate this. All you're doing is ripping that grub screw through the nicely extruded aluminum up there, or whatever this is made out of. It's a nice hard metal. And you're really just damaging your brand new Flexion Extruder, so be careful of that. So what you want to do, let's sort of get this back into place here. Turn this. We'll put my grub screw back in. And you can turn this until it's about flush with the body. You don't have to torque it all the way down. And we'll rotate this again. There, so that's kind of flat in that direction. And then we'll turn the gear by hand. There we go, until we've got sort of the grub screw here lined up with the flat part of the stepper motor shaft there. And I'm going to turn that in until it's tight enough that it stays on the shaft, but loose enough again so that it moves up and down pretty freely. We want some of that flex in here while we're doing our alignment. All right, good. So now that I've got that in place, you want to make sure that your set here on this set screw for your filament. So this little cam here, 4 is for PLA, 3 is for ABS, 2 is for some of the stiffer versions of TPU or Ninja Flex, and then of course 1 is for your softest Ninja Flex. And in order to get down there, you might want to go ahead and pop the grub screw out and then line it back up. So I'm going to set for 3, which is ABS. I'm going to use my test piece of filament here, and I'm sort of push down to open it up a little bit, and then I'm going to run my piece of filament through here until I see it lining up with my extruder gear. And then I'm going to sort of gently give it a little turn and help. What you're looking for is an alignment. I can see I am totally outside of my gear here, so I'm going to slowly slide this up until I can sort of see my filament tucking into the groove of the feeder gear. Looks pretty good there. This helps if your feeder gear, or if your filament's not bent to all heck like mine is here. I'll give myself a little more room. I'll start with the 4. There we go. So I pushed it through, and you kind of see things start moving. And that's what you want to do, and you notice I'm actually able to pull this out with 4. So I want to switch it over to 3. And there, it's got a better grab on it. And so you see, as I'm moving this back and forth, what's happening is it's shifting this feeder gear up and down and sort of aligning it to the V-pulley on the other side. All right, so I feel pretty good about that. It's a good alignment. Everything's moving quite nicely. So now I'm going to go ahead and leave it in place. I'm going to turn the shaft back towards me. Again, this going towards the lower right so you can get to the grub screw. And then I'm going to go ahead and tighten down my grub screw. I'll give it a little twist with the ball driver. And then a final twist with my good Allen wrench there. And now I'll actually just pull the filament, or push the filament in this case, to get to the other grub screw. And then we'll tighten that one down. This is Jim's what not to do when you're aligning things. There we go. That's pretty tight. We can see that there's a good amount of grab there that I can turn the entire assembly with a piece of ABS filament. So that looks pretty good. The brush is nice and lined up with the side of the feeder gear, so it's going to clean that up real nicely. And I'm happy with the way that alignment works. Take one more moment here and make sure that your screws that are going to the body of your motor are nice and tight. And again, notice when I'm installing this, I am installing it with the motor connector to the left here. That's the way I like it. It gives you that just a little bit of extra clearance from the cable header on your Z-axis. So our next step is going to be to install this on the body. But first we're going to go ahead and remove the old hot block now that that's cooled down and install the new hot block. We've got some room to start working on this now that we've adjusted the Z height. I'm going to go ahead and peel my pressed PLA out of there. And the first thing I'm going to do is I want to protect the thermistor here. So we're going to remove that before we mess with anything else. And there should not be a lot of tension on this screw. It's really just to keep the thing in there. You don't want to pinch the wires. You don't want to break anything, so I'm going to go ahead and get that out. Set the screw aside here, and then very gently remove the thermistor, and then I'm even going to disconnect it from the wiring harness here so that it's completely out of the way while I'm working on this. All right. Our next step is we're going to go ahead and disconnect the cooling block from the brace. And I'll get the fan completely out of the way as well while I'm doing that. I think it's the smaller one. No, it's the bigger one. So third to smallest. And we got that first front screw and the back screw. Then we can remove the actual counterclockwise here, loosens the screw. And I want this nice and loose. Get up in there. And what I was thinking I've had happen before is I had a pretty rough print where the plastic actually pushed back up above the nozzle and melted inside that hole. That hole gets pretty hot, and so it will melt quite nicely in there. Keep backing the screw out until I've got plenty of room. There we go. There we think we go. Oh yeah, I've got the grub screw out at this point. Set that down there. And it looks like I've just got some material burned on the other side here, so be gentle. You don't want to break those wires. And I'm going to try pressing from the other side here. Wow, that does not want to leave. Alright, fine. We'll go ahead and take the hot end out first. There we go. And undid that set screw. We remove the heater block from the Micro Swiss all hot end, or all metal hot end. There we go. Got that disconnected. I am fighting some filament still in there. That's what's going on. There we are. I still have a piece of filament in there. Now we're going to go ahead and install the insulation on the hot block here. So this is pretty easy, and it's a good thing to do, especially if we're going to be printing any sort of PLA-based filament, just because the downward fan of the PLA actually blows back up at the hot block a little bit. And so by running this insulation tape over that, it will go ahead and retain more of that heat. You'll lose a little bit through the nozzle still, but much better than if you hadn't done it this way. So you can line this up pretty easily, and you can tell which end's which. If you look on this side, there is a screw hole for the set screw that tightens down on the heater cartridge that matches up with this, whereas if you try to do it the other way, you'll cover up the set screw. So easy enough to do. So let's start on this side and kind of look at how this works. You can see this lines up over here, and we'll use use the barrel to hold that in place. It just needs to be finger tightened for now. Then we'll come around the other side here, and this is actually sort of folded. It's got the fold points on it, so it makes it really easy to come around. So you can see there's the screw, you can see the other side of the nozzle. Tighten that down, and we'll use some tools to tighten this down in a minute. And then you go ahead and bring this over, and it looks like the piece of Captain tape that they gave me here is a little long. You can kind of see it floats up against there. So once I have this all nicely in place, I'll just take a razor blade and either cut a little half circle out of that where the hot end goes or where the tube goes in, or I'll just cut it flush against the body because I don't really want that flapping up there to get caught and peel off. So that's that part. On our next step, we're going to go ahead and put the hot block through the cooling block. And this one's a pretty straightforward installation, but in some cases you'll notice, in fact with mine was as well, that this set screw will be partially turned in or tightened down. So you want to back that set screw up and then go ahead and install the extruder nozzle here into the block. Now what's great about this particular model is that it's stepped here so that it will stop at the proper place inside the hot block. And you'll notice that on mine I've got the body or I guess the hinge point here facing the longer portion of the body. And that's the way you want to do this, so these are lined up. And then once that's in there, and this is all the way flush, we know that our clearance here is correct for the extruder. And that's important since the entire kind of point of this extruder is to support the filament all the way through the pathway. So it's important that this picks up right here. This is cut to a specific length. This is notched to fit between the extruder gear and the pulley or the idler. And so there, that's nice and tight on there. Now we're going to reinstall our thermistor inside of our new hot end configuration here. And you'll notice that there's a set screw on this side. You can put it on either side here. I think based on the way I'm going to have this. Oh, I had it right the first time. So I'm going to have this come in the same direction as before, where I've got my heater cartridge and my thermistor. So we'll go ahead and plan on putting it on this side. So we are going to move the set screw to the other side. Remember, be gentle with this thing. I'm going to go ahead and set it in the hole there. And it would sort of be ideal to be able to put this screw through there, but that doesn't look like it's going to work. Oop. We don't have enough clearance on that. I don't want to bend the wires too much, but let's see if we can pull this off. It does look like it lines up. So we've sort of got the the holder screw splitting the two leads, which will give it a good amount of support. And then I'm going to pinch these back together so that they sit underneath the screw. And remember, this is not a mechanical thing. We're not, trying to bind this to the body of the hot block. We really just don't want it to slip out. So it's really just finger tight. I mean, not even finger tight. You just want it enough so that the thermistor doesn't pop out of the hot block. So I got that there. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and put the heater cartridge in. Take that. And we'll just slide it in. And remember, we've got this screw here. And I try to make this about equidistant on either side of the hot block so that the heat's being distributed pretty evenly. And then this is our set screw down here that tightens the cartridge into the hot block. There we go. I did contact Flexion support and asked them about tightening this nozzle down. If you remember in our micro Swiss, we went ahead and tightened it down, turned it back a quarter turn, preheated to 230C, and then tightened it back down. Now it's just because of the way they've got a flat versus a conical seal here, this one doesn't need that extra step. You still get a nice clean seal with it just tightened down before you've preheated it. Alright, I just took the heater cartridge back out because I realized as I was dry fitting this for the install that the screw holes that actually mounted to the block are on the wrong side. So let's go back and fix that. Lots of things you don't catch if it just goes right the first time. And we'll go ahead and flip that around. And you want to put a little bit of downward pressure on this or squeeze them together so that you're bottomed out all the way when you tighten this down. Again, these clearances are pretty specific, and we just want everything to be aligned when we install it. It's pretty good. All right, we'll put the heater cartridge back in now. Guess I didn't need to take the heater cartridge out to do that. Just snug this all the way down. Again, we want to make sure that we've got about the same amount coming out each side. Looks like got a little bit more on one side. Just kind of slide that into place. So everything looks good there. All right, we got everything on. Go ahead and slide this into place. And that fits pretty good. Now we take our original screws that hold the cooling block on, and we'll switch angles so you can see better. All right. There we go. We'll get the second one in the back. Good. All right, we'll change angles again. All right. So we'll start by running the tube into the little hole in the bottom here. Then we'll run the holes, or run the long screws through the holes. And if everything goes right, this should line up and go into the motor body. Boy, I should have slid that over before I did that. All right, looks like that one's seating. We'll go ahead and move this over a little bit. And we'll go over to the other side. And it does look like the actual extruder motor, the stepper motor, floats a little bit above the bottom of the arm. So it's firmly attached to the cooling block, but it doesn't sit all the way down on the extruder arm itself. And I'll get a closer view here in a second and show you what I mean by that. Or I'll just throw my tools. Actually seated, that's good. All right, those are tightened down. There's definitely some new interesting gaps here. So let's go ahead and take a close look. So you'll notice first off in here, you know, this used to be pretty well seated against the entire lever setup, and that's no longer the case. It's nice because I can see inside. I can see the filament path all the way through there. You can kind of see the teeth on the gear down there in the center. You can see the brush working. I can really see what's going on in this pathway. But what I was talking about earlier is that there's now a gap. You can kind of see in here between the bottom of the motor, the stepper motor, and the arm itself. And I think in the previous configuration that sat pretty well flush. I got a flashlight in here so you can see a little bit better. Yeah, there we go. So you can see that we've got a nice clear gap in there, and it really is floating just on those two screws that are bound through the cooling block. So the whole thing's cantilevered a little bit. I don't think it should be a problem, but may end up printing a little bit of a support, just something that fits in there and holds the stepper motor up. Yeah, now we're blurry. There we go. So I don't think it's a problem. I mean, those are pretty long screws. You've got two of them, you know, one on either side, and that's sandwiched pretty well. I'm going to say we're in good condition there. There's probably nothing to worry about. So yeah, that thing's fully installed now. They call this the bonus step. If you want, you can actually take, there's one more piece in the kit. Let me grab it here. That is a little intake guide. And so if you really want to take this all the way, make sure again that this is sort of parallel to the body. You slide that in this top part and bring it all the way down until you sort of feel it seat in there. And now we've got, basically the filament can't get anywhere from here all the way out the nozzle. There is no exit path. It is guided completely. There was probably a 1 or 2 millimeter gap inside before this tube was here, and now that's gone. So not a bad idea, kind of a cool little feature here. And then you're going to start feeding your filament in here. So I'm going to finish putting all the connectors back together, routing all my wiring and fans, and then we'll take a look and see how this thing works. I have the stepper motor plugged back in, and I went ahead and plugged in my cooling block fan. So everything's pretty well wrapped back up. I just put a short little piece of filament in here for testing. But we're going to go and power it on. And it was actually really easy to load this stuff. So it's got a nice positive grip. I set the wheel over here to 4, which is really for PLA. Probably be on 3 for ABS. But once that's done, you can go ahead and turn the wheel and set it to the next tighter setting. So now I've got a real good grip on it. You can move the filament up and down. You can kind of see the cleaning wheel move. But that's really what you want, is a real good grip on the filament. Okay, we're up to 225. And I'm seeing just a little bit of my plastic coming through the nozzle there, which is good. It means we're fed all the way. And I realized sort of my first thing I'm not going to be able to do anymore, which is to press down on the little lever and feed filament. So we're going to have to do it through the control panel here. So I'm going to go to extruder again, and then I'm going to go to extruder position, and I'm going to click it a little bit. And this is moving just right. You can kind of get close up here and see it. So you can just see how precise and how controlled this feed is. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the prints that come out. You see I got myself a little squiggly goo right down there. So I'll have to clean that off the nozzle. Nice to have a new nozzle. It's already covered in ABS plastic. We sort of knew that was coming. So I'm going to go ahead and fire off a print here. It's going to be an ABS print though, so I need to preheat the bed and clean up the nozzle a little bit. So we'll get back when that's ready. I was looking through the box while I'm preheating for this test print. And you know, I saw when they installed the little, you know, flexion sticker here. I'm like, oh, isn't that cute? You know, a little badge. But if you look closely at it, it actually has a little dial setting to durometer value chart. So a durometer, of course, is the flexibility or the compressibility of a particular kind of filament. So this is actually a nice little reference. You know, if you've got your durometer information on your flexible filament, you can use this as kind of a quick reference. So, you know, congratulations to Flexion. You guys, the sticker has earned a place on my bot. So we'll go ahead and get that installed. That'll be great. All right, first print with Flexion. And we're doing my favorite D3 cooler because, again, it's still on the SD card. No other reason. Someday I'll put a different one, but I usually print off of Octoprint, and so the only time I use the SD card is when I'm out of my enclosure with my Octoprint Pi on it. Nice clean extrusion there. Like we are dragging one of our initial prints, but it doesn't seem to be bothering it too much. Ready to don't try this at home? Ha ha ha. Gotcha. Okay, so it's a good time to talk about what the Flexion is and what it isn't. My original hope was that this was going to be the last extruder mod I ever installed. And I have got to give it to Diabase Engineering. They are honest about this. This is an amazing extruder for ABS, for PLA, and for, of course, the Ninja Flex or the TPU type of filaments. It is not an all-metal hot end. They are offering an option. It's not available for release yet. We're going to be testing that probably on one of the videos coming up here as soon as it's out for beta, and finding out what it looks like. Unfortunately, as soon as you install the all-metal hot end, you lose the ability to do TPU at full speed. So there's a little bit of give and take here. You know, it's an engineering challenge to figure out how to support flexible filaments, and they have succeeded in that completely. Exceedingly well-designed system. What this isn't, and what I was again hoping, was that this is going to be the last one I ever installed, the best one for every filament. But when you get into high temperature filaments like PLA, or not PLA, sorry, PETG or nylon, this still has the same TPU breakdown issues that the Micro Swiss hot end solves. So you do need an all metal hot end if you want to work consistently with those high temperature filaments. Again, as long as you stick with ABS, with PLA, you're going to do just fine. This is a amazing extruder, especially, you know, TPU was what it was designed for. So, you know, keep working on it. We'll try out the different options with this, and we'll see how we end up. But so far, I am extremely pleased. You know, we are seeing a very clean extrusion on this. I'm not seeing any filament skipping whatsoever. Adhesion is great to the bed. You know, couldn't be happier with this design, with this implementation. I'll give it a couple of weeks and run some longer prints on it. I've got a new mounting for my Galaxy, or not my Galaxy, my Nexus 5X that I'm putting in my car. I printed a mounting plate for it, and that was my next big project. So I'll be probably printing that in Black Pet G. So I may have to switch back, but I may give it a shot in ABS first, just to give this thing its full paces. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching. I won't say subscribe if you like it, because that's your call. Thanks, guys. Take care.